Well, hello. It's been a little while since we've done this. I think I'm probably a bit rusty, so if I stammer or stutter or do anything like that, you'll just have to forgive me. So, we are on to the second portion of Unit 4. Unit 4 is the biggest unit this year, Institutions of National Government. We just finished our quick study of Congress, and now we're moving on to our just as quick study of the executive branch, in particular, the presidency. So we'll begin today with topic number 6 in Unit 4. Topic number 6, the presidency. How do you get the job? How do you lose the job? It's actually a little bit more complicated than you might think. Quick question before we start. These presidents of ours, are they just like us? Are they wealthy, elite snobs? Who are these people? First thing that's worth mentioning is this. If you want to run for president, it doesn't take a lot constitutionally. I'm qualified constitutionally. I've met the constitutional requirements, which are 35 years old. Yep, check. A natural-born citizen. Yep, check. And lived in the country for at least 14 years. Yep, check. And by the way, that 14 years means just total. Not even 14 consecutive years. So Dwight Eisenhower, who was president from 1950 to 1958, had not been in the country for 14 years consecutively because, for amongst other reasons, he had served as the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe during World War II. But he had lived in the country for 14 years total. So I'm qualified. Maybe it's time for me to run. Irwin 2016. Who's with me? If you study the presidents, you will also notice that all of them, everyone has been a male, a man. All of them have been white, except for one. Guess who? All of them have been Protestant Christians, except for one. That would be your John F. Kennedy Jr., who was a Roman Catholic, elected in 1960. It is still nonetheless true, though, that if you dig beneath those surface connections, those surface commonalities, there really are a lot of different kinds of men who have served as president. So everyone from the Renaissance man, philosopher, musician, legal scholar, etc., Thomas Jefferson, to the poor-born, log-splitting, turned philosopher, spiritualist president we had named Abraham Lincoln, to the Hollywood actor turned president, Ronald Reagan, to our current president, Barack Obama, constitutional lawyer, community activist, state senator, U.S. senator, now president. So how do you get your job aside from being constitutionally qualified? They don't give it to every one of us who meet the constitutional qualifications. I'm not president. What would I have to do? Well, of course, the normal answer is you get elected. Term of office for the president, as you may know already, is 4 years. So longer than a member of the House. That was just 2 years. Not as long as a U.S. senator. Interesting. Which will tell you something. That means the Founding Fathers wanted the president to be somewhere in between, in terms of being responsible to the people, but also bound to do what is right. Our first president, George Washington, was popular enough that the man could have served as president until he died if he'd wanted to. Some people were actually proposing that he be titled King, Your Highness. He would have none of it. So he served as president for 8 years, and then he did something which, if you study world history, is very, very uncommon. He voluntarily gave up power. At the time, there was no constitutional requirement for him to do so. He could have continued to serve as president for third, fourth, fifth, sixth term, who knows. He nonetheless chose to step down after 2 terms, and that set a very powerful example, a powerful precedent for all the presidents who came after him for many years. Until we get to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who won not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 terms of office. Roosevelt served 4 terms of office, really 3.5, because he died not too long into his 4th term. And so it wasn't too long after that in 1951, the 22nd Amendment was passed, which constitutionally now limits presidents to serving only 2 terms of office. Roosevelt was a popular president, but nonetheless there was a growing swell of support for this idea that we don't want a king, that we should have turnover in the White House. So the 22nd Amendment was passed because of our friend FDR. There he was. Okay. There have been a few presidents that have gotten their jobs not by winning elections. For these other people, they would get the job through not election, but succession, meaning they took the place of a president who, in some cases a president who died, a president who resigned, or a president who was impeached and removed from office. Now that last one has not happened. Not yet. So what's the order of succession? If the president dies or resigns or is unable to do their job, what's the order of succession? Well, we'll get into too much detail, but you probably know the vice president's next. Third in line would be Speaker. After that is a position in the Senate called the President pro tem, or pro tempore, for the temporary. That would be the second ranking officer in the Senate. Basically, it's the longest serving member of the U.S. Senate. You don't really have to do anything to be President pro tempore other than just be a long-serving member. After the President pro tem, it would be a list of cabinet secretaries in the order their department was originally created. Now that list, the order of succession, is not in the Constitution. It is established rather simply by law passed by Congress. Now in 1967, the 25th Amendment was passed, which got a little more specific about some matters of presidential succession. For example, the 25th Amendment establishes the means to select a new vice president in case the vice president becomes the new president, right? So then we'd have a vice presidential hole. The 25th Amendment specifically says that in such a situation, the new president would nominate a new vice president, and then both houses of Congress would need to approve by a majority vote. The man on the right, Gerald Ford, that happened with him when Richard Nixon's vice president, Spiro Agnew, resigned. Nixon nominated Gerald Ford there, and both houses approved. Ford would later go on to become president when Nixon resigned. So Ford not only got to be vice president, but even president without having won his own election. 25th Amendment also lays out a process. Time out. Be right back. Okay, let's see where we were here. Oh, right. So, Gerald Ford, moving on. 25th Amendment also lays out the process when a president becomes unable to perform the job for an extended period. So let's say the president fell into a coma, like Woodrow Wilson in the late 19-teens. Or maybe you've watched the show 24 with Kiefer Sutherland. Supposing the vice president and the cabinet secretaries turn on the president and they make up stories and say that he is unable to perform the job. How would that all work out? 25th Amendment says that the determination is made by the vice president and a majority of the cabinet secretaries as to whether the president is able or unable to do his job. If the majority of them say that he is not, then the vice president becomes the acting president for a time, until the president, the real president, is once again able to do his job. How do you lose your job? Fun. Well, through the process of, here we go, step number 1, impeachment. Remember, that's formal accusation by the House of Representatives. All it takes is a simple majority vote. Then, step 2, removal from office by the Senate. That requires a 2/3 vote of the Senate. And very interestingly, at that, basically a trial, who is the presiding judge? The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. Imagine the theater of watching that on television. I got to do that. Well, I got to watch the impeachment hearings anyway with Bill Clinton. For what do you get impeached? Well, according to Article 2, Section 4, under the executive branch, impeachment comes for, quote, treason, like being a spy, bribery, accepting money, being corrupt, or, and this is the vague part, other high crimes and misdemeanors. What does that mean exactly? The only 2 presidents who have been impeached would be the guy on top. That would be Andrew Johnson. 1868, he had been Lincoln's VP. When Lincoln died, Johnson became president. Johnson was a Southern Democrat. The Congress at the time was controlled by Northern Republicans. Use your imagination. And Bill Clinton in 1998 was impeached by the House for his affair with Monica Lewinsky, at least according to the House at the time, controlled by Republicans. Clinton is a Democrat. His naughtiness with Monica Lewinsky constituted high crimes and misdemeanors. But neither of them were removed. How about Richard Nixon, whom we will be talking about in class tomorrow? Was he removed from office? No. Why not? Well, he would have certainly been both impeached and removed from office. Clear evidence against him, which again we'll look at. But he resigned first, which basically granted him amnesty from this entire process. So you want to impeach the president, do you? Hypothetically. What does it take? As I said, Article 2, Section 4, that part about high crimes and misdemeanors, that is definitely open to interpretation. But there is agreement by constitutional scholars on the following 4 points. Number 1, you don't have to commit a crime to be impeached. So, for example, supposing the president simply refused to show up in the West Wing to do his job. Is that a crime? Statutory crime by state laws? No. Is it impeachable grounds? Absolutely. Second point of agreement by constitutional scholars. The offense must be really serious. So, on the off chance, though this would never happen these days, supposing the president decided to take his own car out and go for a drive, and he broke the speed limit, is he going to be impeached? No. Point number 3 of agreement. You can't, or at least you shouldn't, bring impeachment charges against the president simply because the president's policy views disagree with your own. This happened in 1868 with Andrew Johnson, and it's generally considered to be a real abuse of the powers of impeachment for the House to do this. Some made that same argument in 1998 with President Clinton. But, fourth point of agreement, number 4, at the end of the day, this is ultimately a political process. In other words, you can impeach the president for, well, whatever you decide constitutes high crimes and misdemeanors. Remember, it's the House and the Senate ultimately who make the final call. So there really is flexibility there. And I believe, yes, that is the end of our notes for the day. Hope you took some good ones. See you in class tomorrow, where we will spend some more time talking about the extent of the president's powers and impeachment and removal stuff with Richard Nixon and Watergate. Mr. Irwin, signing off.